Congresswoman Grace Meng, welcome to the People's Cabinet.
I love it. It's exactly what we need. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for your time. You are home early. The House has been recessed. Uh, Obviously, a lot of conversation on the Epstein files. I think most people understand that Donald Trump is trying to obstruct something, or the speaker is, but I don't think people understand procedurally what was on the table and what the speaker did. So, can we start there? And could you explain what actually is going on in as layman's terms you possibly can?
Yeah, I mean, June and July are actually the busy season in Congress. We are supposed to be having markups for bills to pass out of committee and to go to the floor for us to vote on. We are supposed to be working.
Means what exactly?
Markup means when you have a bill, it has to go through a committee. Both sides weigh in. You can amend it. You can make it better, sometimes worse, unfortunately.
So you say
And when it comes
amount of funding that goes here or there, and you said I'd rather have it be this. Is that how that works?
Exactly. Yeah. It's the legislative process. It's what Congress does. And this was supposed to happen, in July. We had another few days, a week of work left. And then one by one, we saw the Republican majority shut down our committees from education to rules. And we can't pass most bills without going through the Rules Committee. And then my committee that I sit on, which is appropriations, all shut down early. And we were literally told very suddenly, go home, our work is done, when it really wasn't done.
And why did they do that?
Well,
What
they were really,
what would have happened had they kept it to the August at first recess?
yeah. Well, they were seeing that many Americans on both sides of the aisle had questions about the Epstein files. They also did not like that they were getting questions from the press about the Epstein files. And so, because they were scared of the process and didn't want it out there, didn't want this conversation out there, they just sent us home.
Would there have been some kind of vote that would have potentially released more files or otherwise had you stayed in session for another week?
Well, we saw that on the Oversight Committee, our top Democrat, Robert Garcia, and Congresswoman Summer Lee successfully passed a vote, an amendment, which is rare because remember, Democrats are in the minority. But Democrats actually won that vote where it would require basically a subpoena and more information to come out on the Epstein files. And that really spooked them. And they didn't want any more of that. So they shut it down.
Aren't they just delaying the inevitable? I mean, eventually you have to come back into session, right? What will happen when you come back into session? And by the way, is it absolute that there's a date in which you will come back, or how will that work?
We are supposed to come back in early September. They are hoping that the American people have amnesia uh, and won't bring it up again, but I don't think that's likely.
So let's talk about the work that you're doing now, because again, I think there's a lot of conversation about the big, beautiful bill that passed. A lot of social media conversation about people losing their health care, Medicaid, a lot of concerns about science implications. But I think one of the things that I think people are struggling with is they don't get a lot of real world examples in Washington as to what is at stake and where we go from here. And obviously your purview touches commerce, it touches the Justice Department, it touches science. So let's start with justice. What are some things that are top of mind for you as we move forward? Where is there still opportunities to fight back, and what is now settled because of the passage?
Well, my committee was actually one of the ones that got dismissed early. So we didn't even actually get to complete our work. So you're right. I hope that there are opportunities for us when we come back to go through a normal budgetary process and to work on this budget bill that basically determines the budget of agencies like the Department of Justice, Commerce, NASA, and NOAA for our committee's
And
purposes.
can you explain?
One thing,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but can you explain what the difference is between what the big beautiful bill was and what this budget process is?
So the budgetary process that we're supposed to go through right now as we speak will determine the budget for fiscal year 2026. So that's forward looking. And that is can be something that is inspirational for Americans because we can show them a blueprint of what Congress should spend money on and what Congress should spend less money on. What we have seen so far coming out of that bill, what they've proposed, is a little scary because they have proposed, for example, to cut money and funding for programs to fight against hate crimes. So that's something that looking forward, we hope to improve on. The big ugly bill, as we like to call it, is something that will impact communities pretty much either anywhere from immediately to the next few years. That's something that will have a severe impact on areas like healthcare, for example. It will take away healthcare from many senior citizens and families who depend on a safety net that this government has provided and keeps our communities healthy. So those are some of the larger buckets that the big, beautiful, or ugly bill will impact.
And you represent Queens. What are you hearing from constituents and organizations that receive funding right now that probably won't or are at risk as a result of this?
They are terrified. Yesterday, we just met with some of our local hospitals and community health centers. Assuming this big ugly bill goes forward, in New York alone, 65,000 jobs will be lost just from the healthcare world. So, our local hospitals and our community health centers. And look, people try to sell this bill saying it, cuts waste, fraud, and abuse, but that's not true. 65,000 people in one state alone, at least losing their jobs, that's not going to allow people to cut costs and save money.
If you ask Republicans, they will say what you said, waste, fraud, and abuse. They'll also say, well, we're running up a huge deficit and we need to address it. And so, anytime you need to cut revenue, anytime you need to cut in order to do that, you're going to have some pain no matter what. What is your response to that, especially in the context of, we are adding significant amounts to the deficit with the tax cuts?
Yeah, this is not a cost-effective way what they're doing. They are literally going to cost many states and communities money. New York State, my home state, will lose millions and maybe billions of dollars. There will be less revenue. Families will be sicker. People will not be able to seek, for example, preventative care. And instead, they will have to go to the emergency room if they need health care, and their diseases and illnesses may get more severe. We all want to cut fraud, waste, and abuse, but we have to do it in a thoughtful way. We can't do it in such a cruel way and misguided. It's not going to achieve what they're trying to achieve.
So when you return, hopefully when you return, Epstein files aside, which obviously is something that will be top of mind. When you think about your committee and some of the top things that you want to be fighting, that you think that listeners should be prioritizing, as I mentioned, justice, commerce, science. There's so much that we could go through, but this area a lot better than I think our listeners, and certainly I do. And I would love for you to be able to raise. Here are the 3 or 4 things that I think that everyone should be tracking, and what people can do about it.
Yeah, well, a new term that a lot of Americans learned about in the last few months is NOAA, NOAA. Most people never heard of that term before, but now a lot of people know what NOAA means. And basically, as we head into hurricane season in many parts of the country, as we just saw the tsunami warnings come across much of our West Coast and in Hawaii and Alaska, these are just very few of the examples why we need to make sure that our weather forecasts are accurate, that they are scientifically based, and we need to make sure that we have the experts leading that agency to keep our families safe and alive, quite frankly. We need those accurate warnings. So that's a top priority that Americans on both sides of the aisle need to keep an eye
And
on.
what is on the table
Uh,
right now in terms of funding or lack thereof?
Well, they are cutting funding. We have already heard in places like Florida, which are, it's one of the centers of potential hurricanes, that they're cutting major offices and cutting personnel and staff that will prevent the forecast from being made in an accurate way, and families on the ground won't be able to get the information that they need to protect themselves.
And then, a lot of verbiage that's espoused by Republicans is on public safety. They give a lot of flack to Democrats for not being tough on crime. But it's been brought to my attention that a lot of the cuts that are being proposed would negatively impact public safety. I know, given your purview, that's top of mind. So could you give us a couple of examples of some of the things that you think are going to be detrimental to a person walking down the street feeling safe that we need to be aware of?
Absolutely. And I come from New York, where the NYPD force is one of the largest in the country. And what we have seen from the Department of Justice's budget proposal under the Trump administration, they're proposing to cut a lot of community grants that would keep our community safe and help deter violence. That's something that really worries us. From the most local of neighborhoods around the country, families and schools, organizations literally depend on that money to make sure that our community is safe. And in turn, it keeps our police officers safer as well. I mentioned before that they're eliminating most, if not all, of hate crime grants. These are another area where our communities are kept safer because local organizations who are recipients of this funding are using them to make sure that crimes are being reported, that crimes are being prevented. So eliminating these grants are not going to keep our community safer.
And I think a narrative that has been espoused is there's waste, fraud, and abuse in nonprofits. They're trying to say that people are getting rich off of that. Can you address that? And are there organizations that come to mind, whether in your district or otherwise, that where this money is flowing, where you're going to see a negative impact as a result?
Well, when things are happening in the neighborhoods, right, whether there are gun buyback programs, whether there are after school programs in neighborhoods where there are at risk youth, whether there are programs that promote communication and promote community between police officers, the police departments, and our community members, these are all programs that are being cut. And so, what we're afraid of is that we are going to see a lot of these programs uh, disappear, and people will not be able to rely on the local community organizations. If you want to talk about something that's happening in the neighborhood, you want to partner with your local police department through a lot of these organizations, they won't be there anymore. And they have worked, studies and data showed that they have worked, and so we need more of them, not less.
Another area that I know is a concern of yours is the work that Doge, even though Elon Musk may not be in the forefront anymore, still continues to do around government. In particular, in NASA, which I know is a purview of yours. Could you just talk about what is at stake there and what people should be tracking?
Yeah, this is really devastating, because this administration loves to talk about making America great again and ensuring that America is a leader around the world. Cutting NASA grants ensures that America will not be first in the world. NASA and its missions are often a way to promote diplomacy around the world. And NASA is just not for only to have missions to space, but also invest directly in a lot of STEM education programming. It literally helps invest in our schools and our classrooms so that we can have a STEM pipeline so that American kids, American students can become the workforce that we need. And so, if you're talking about building an America First pipeline, especially in the STEM world, cutting grants invested by NASA and agencies like NSF, that is doing the exact opposite and will really cripple America's ability to promote and expand our talent pipeline.
And what is your perspective on this? I think general larger ethos of the president, which is cutting funding that maybe in the short term he can say he's not spending as much, but in the long term affects us negatively. You talked about NASA and STEM funding, which will result in fewer people pursuing fields in the sciences. You can point to USAID that maybe tomorrow we're not going to feel the effects of around the world of what we're doing, but certainly in the longer term, whereas Russia, China, what have you, fills in the gap when it comes time, what country are some of these developing countries going to want to side with at the end of the day if the United States has deserted them and these other countries have filled in? So what is your thought on that? And when you talk to your Republican colleagues, even off the record, do they get that this is a longer term concern?
Absolutely. And that's even more heartbreaking. That's why it's so hurtful, because when you talk to most of my Republican colleagues, we are on the same page. When we're talking about cutting programs like USAID or PEPFAR, we are on very similar pages. They know that it's going to hurt America.
And PEPFAR
And
or AIDS prevention, is that correct?
Correct, correct. And this is something that has been really hard to watch as we're putting together our, upcoming budgets. USAID, the elimination of it pretty much has impacted organizations that are really literally feeding kids and families around the country. These packets of food have the American flag on them, and people, I visited countries in recent times, like in Kenya, where they are literally saying thank you to America for taking care of them. And when we are literally gone, we are now MIA from that USAID world and that international diplomacy. Yes, other countries like Russia and China will step in and fill the gap. So if we want to promote democracy and safety around the country, we just took out one of our most powerful tools.
What do you think it's going to take for your colleagues? I'm sure many of them would wish that they could do more. They are scared of Trump. They're scared of the speaker. You know these dynamics far better than I do or most of our listeners. So what do you think it's going to take for them to start to break? Obviously, we saw Representative Massey break a little bit, and on the Senate side, Rand Paul. But for the most part, everyone is in lockstep, even to protect a potential pedophile, like pedophile actions, I should say, right? And so, what is it going to take for people to realize that they are just literally just going off of a cliff in some regard? And do they understand? Will it be an approval rating thing, or are they just so scared of Donald Trump and the machine that they're just going to go as far as he wants them to?
Oh, it's true. They are very scared. I don't know if it takes more favorable public polling against some of what they're doing. I don't know if it takes more of their constituents in speaking out against some of their votes and what they're, saying out loud instead of behind the scenes. And I really hope for that. I don't know if it takes until after their next primary season, where they don't have to worry about their next primary and what Donald Trump might do to them if someone's running against them. But I will say, and I still have to, better analyze this. This Epstein phenomenon is actually causing less. It's not unifying them. We are seeing them in some cases, like we saw in the Oversight Committee, vote with Democrats, which means they are hearing from their base. And some of them are telling me behind the scenes that this situation shows corruption. So for some reason, this was the incident or the part of history that they felt like showed that Donald Trump was corrupt to them.
And then to a larger point about Donald Trump and his coalition, you and I are both Asian American. You're chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus. there were a lot of minority groups that shifted away from the Democratic Party in 2024, but among them was Asian Americans. I'm curious in your perspective on that, if it was something that you saw and weren't surprised to see, if you were surprised by it, and later how we win that group and other communities of color back statistically.
I think it's reversible. I think that
And did you see it? Could you feel it on the ground?
I did. And I don't think, hindsight's always 2020, but even before the election, I don't think we did a sufficient enough job of reaching out to them. We are not present enough in their social media channels. We may be at the stage where we're detecting misinformation, but we're not exactly effective at fighting back and pushing back against it. We were hearing from constituents who had Breitbart type articles translated on their social media networks with not much to push back on. When the Republican Party is doing a better job at reaching our communities in language and where they are, that's a problem. And our party at all levels of government need to do a much better job at that.
Do you see a correction in that, or do you think there's still work to do?
I think there's still a lot of work to do. We've had special elections since November, and I think Democrats have been overperforming, which gives me a lot of hope. I see colleagues trying to reach out to different communities in different languages on different platforms. Our caucus, our Asian caucus, I'm the chair of KPAC, which is the caucus that represents our Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities. We're trying to, do videos and face to camera in different languages so people could put this directly in their family and friends' social media chats, and to help us to try to get the message out and meet people where they are. But I think it's reversible. I think we have a lot to show that they deserve better. Our communities deserve better. And they may have thought that they were voting for something and someone that promised them something, but they're not getting it, and they deserve better.
Do you have any thoughts on a narrative that I hear in the Asian American community? And I'm not saying I agree with it, but I can understand the argument, which is some people are saying, well, I see all this money being spent with migrants and being put in hotels and things. And, my family came here and just scraped by. And so I'm turned off by this notion that there's not even that they don't like migrants, but more so that they are just offended by the notion that they shouldn't have mixed feelings about it, right? That it's kind of like an absolute, like this is, and I think there's a lot of people who have debates about immigration in general and are turned off by this notion that it's absolute when people continue to struggle in communities. And there's the model minority myth in the Asian American community that everyone's well off when statistically it's not the case, right? So I'm curious in your perspectives on that.
Absolutely. Asian Americans in many communities have a high level of poverty. Asian American seniors in places like New York have one of the highest suicide rates. And that model minority myth really hurts us. But I think you're absolutely right. This is an issue to many of scarcity. It's an issue of unfairness, and someone else cut the line ahead of me. And no one likes to be cut ahead in line. But it's also because we collectively, as a government, as a Congress, haven't done a good enough job at taking care of their needs. I don't think people wake up saying that and thinking that they hate migrants, that they hate trans people. But when they feel like we're not, as a party, caring about their issues enough, that's when they look around and they look for a scapegoat. If you just take a look at immigration, people have been waiting 10 plus years for their child or for their sibling, direct relatives, to come to the United States. They haven't seen their family members in forever. And at the same time, when they think that it's the new migrant's fault that they are not getting to see and be with their relative, that's when these, feelings come in. But we have to take care of the basics. We have to take care of everyone.
What other issues do you think that the Democratic Party, as we move forward, need to be putting forward that we may have not prioritized Obviously, there's a lot of debate about why we lost in November 2024, but there still seems to be a lot of debate about how we move forward. Democratic approval rating continues to be hovering around 30%. What is your perspective on that?
You know, I went to church a few weeks ago and the pastor was talking about Christians and non-Christians. And he used an example which I really related to the Democratic Party. He said, "Can people tell the difference that whether you're a Christian or not?" And I thought, wow, as a Democrat, can people tell the difference if I'm a Democrat or Republican or somewhere in between? And has our party stood out, head and shoulders above other parties? When we're talking about cleaning up corruption, has our party stood up? And does the average person who doesn't watch, cable news network or listen to awesome podcasts, can they tell the difference between us, a Democratic politician, and someone from another party? And I don't know if they always can. We think they can, right? We Democrats think in footnotes. We have the whole plan, but people aren't always paying attention. People are working two jobs and trying to take care of their families. So I think we have to do a better job at distinguishing ourselves, like, hey, this is what Democrats stand for. You deserve better. We are here to protect your rights and values, and the other party is not. They're trying to take them away. We are here to help promote uh, opportunities for your family to not just survive, but to thrive. And the other party doesn't. They're trying to take away those opportunities. And we're trying to promote economic opportunities so that your family can achieve their American dream. And the other party is trying to take it away from your family. So are we doing enough to distinguish ourselves from other politicians?
And as we look forward to your return, what are the things that people should expect, both in terms of the timeline from when you get back, and what what top issues will arise? I want people to kind of end this conversation and say, okay, here are the things that are coming up that I should expect, and here are the things that I need to be prioritizing in terms of how I should be tracking the news and potentially fighting back.
Yeah, well, it's not always the most exciting thing, but it's the budget. Look at how Congress spends our money, and there's always room for improvement. But look at areas that the Republican majority is trying to cut. Look at programs that they're trying to cut, and not just in national news headlines, but ask your local hospital, ask your local school, what money do you get from the federal government? Is your Congress member keeping that budget, or are they trying to take it away from you? We need to do a better job, both parties, at educating our constituents and explaining them what Congress does. And the budget is, as you've heard from many people, a moral blueprint, right? This is the best way that we can document and prove what we care about and how we're helping our constituents. And so I just want to make sure that the everyday people are paying attention. There's going to be a lot about the budget. September 30th is a potential government shutdown. So I think that will be the next hot topic to watch.
And lastly, there's still a lot of very disaffected people out there, people who maybe voted for Vice President Harris, who were dejected after the loss. People who voted for Trump, who didn't expect this and are feeling like, why do I bother? And everyone knows someone in their community who just say, I'm done with politics. I don't identify with either party. I'm turned off. What is your advice to our listeners who have those friends and neighbors in their communities who go to them and want to say the message that you will give me right now that will help get them reengaged in government and in politics again?
Well, to encourage those who have lost faith, we need to renew our hope in each other. We have to find ways to support each other. There are so many people out there who are suffering, who have no one to speak up for them. We have to maintain and renew the hope that we have with and for our communities. And to those who voted for Donald Trump and didn't support Kamala Harris, we want you back. We care about everyone. We don't just care about Democrats. We care about every single American. You deserve better. Some of these policies and bills that are being put forth, like the big ugly bill, in many ways it hurts Republican districts and Republican areas more than it does blue cities. And so we want to say, we want you back. We want us with you. We care about you too. And you surely deserve better.
Congresswoman Grace Meng, thanks for coming on the People's Cabinet.
Thank you so much.